In many ways, ice hockey was the sport of the 90s. Its appeal was clear. The game was fast-paced, high-scoring, and violent.
Murphy with a shot. The rebound. They score! Lemieux!
The greatest player who ever lived, Wayne Gretzky, was in his prime. And a whole generation of teenagers was being raised on the Mighty Ducks movies.
Quack, 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 quack.
But it had one major problem: geography. In order to grow, the sport had to move into places where there was very little ice.
There was a lot of pushback. What is this northern sport doing down here? It's never going to work here. It's not native to us and all these other things. Not seeing the bigger picture of where things were going.
I'm Anissa Khalifa. This is The Broadside, where we tell stories from our home in North Carolina at the crossroads of the South. This week, how hockey made a new home for itself in the Sunshine States. All right, and it's just going to be very casual. Like, don't need to, we're just having a conversation. It might make it, it might not. So, yeah, just.
Sounds good.
I recently sat down with my older brother Ibraheem to talk about an odd footnote from our childhood. Like me, he's lived most of his life in the South.
I've been in Raleigh for 25 years and been in North Carolina for about 27.
But like a lot of Southerners, we're not from here originally. Okay, so tell me about when we came to North Carolina in 1998 and the hockey situation. Were you like into hockey back then when we moved here?
You know, it's so funny because growing up in Canada, hockey was the big thing.
Yeah.
Everybody was into hockey. I remember as a kid seeing trading cards. There was Wayne Gretzky cards. There was other cards.
This goes on for a while. But yeah, Ibraheem was into hockey. And when we moved to Greensboro, North Carolina from Toronto, the whole thing was a bit of a shock, for many reasons. But one thing, to his surprise especially, remained the same. There was hockey.
Back to Greensboro, North Carolina. The building's still dark. It'll take some time for the lights to kick in and get back on. They introduced the Hurricanes individually here, and as we told you...
Because the year before we relocated from the north, so did an NHL team. The once struggling Hartford Whalers became the Carolina Hurricanes. And while they were waiting for their new home to be built in Raleigh, they actually played right down the road from ours. Yeah, so they played in the Greensboro Coliseum.
That's right.
And then they had also like a temporary space in Raleigh that they used to play in in the beginning.
What a wild bet. It's like, oh, let's move a NHL team.
What a wild bet. It's something we don't really question today. Southern teams are some of the most successful franchises in the NHL. 3 of the last 5 Stanley Cup champions were from the South, and a lot of them have almost fanatical followings. The Canes have sold out every home game in their 19,000-seat arena for over 3 years.
And here we go. Afternoon hockey in Raleigh. He tries to play it back.
But my brother is totally right. As much as I hate to say that on tape, on its face, it doesn't make a lot of sense. So we're sitting here in Durham, North Carolina. It's February and it was 72 degrees yesterday. Why the heck do we even have hockey here?
I mean, I think this is an overall a vision by the NHL commissioner, Gary Bettman, to spread hockey into what are, quote, non-traditional markets.
Cory Lavalette is a senior editor for North State Journal. It's a statewide paper in North Carolina.
But at the same time, I've continued covering the Carolina Hurricanes, which is kind of my passion project. And I've been doing that for professionally and as a hobby, I guess, for almost 20 years.
Cory says teams like the Hurricanes have their roots in the 1990s, when the appropriately named Gary Bettman staked the future of hockey in North America on the Sun Belt.
And what it's all about is the league is starting to see the population is growing in those areas.
To Bettman, those were tens of millions of potential new fans for the sport. And he wasn't about to let a little thing like 70-degree weather in February get in the way.
The NHL sees this opportunity and it says, we don't play hockey outside. We play it inside. We just need to figure out how to do it right.
So the league flooded the U.S. with expansion teams and relocated several franchises to new cities.
Phoenix, Raleigh, Sunrise, Florida, Tampa, Florida, Dallas, Atlanta, San Jose, Los Angeles.
Pretty much any place that doesn't have 6 months of winter.
Just over and over again.
Now, this may sound risky today, but this was an even bigger gamble back then. Because the league had tried to establish pro hockey in warm weather locations before, with mixed results.
Sunday evening, April 2nd, the Atlanta Flames play the Buffalo Sabres at 7 p.m.
In 1972, the NHL placed a team in Atlanta called the Flames. But after 8 poorly attended seasons, they moved to Calgary. This left only minor league hockey in the South. And so, for over a decade, the sport remained a curiosity at best.
You had teams like the Raleigh Ice Caps who played in Dorton Arena. And apparently, from people I've spoke to, it would fill up with fog because of the...
Amazing.
Yeah, because of the, the heat outside.
And the action on the ice wasn't exactly a great advertisement for the sport.
It's almost more slapshot-like, right? A little more gimmicky, like, hey, let's go to, we're going to go to a fight and a hockey game's going to break out, that kind of hockey from the 1980s where a lot of it was fans kind of frothing at the mouth to see two guys on skates throw their gloves off and fight.
Everybody is just on their feet screaming, kill, kill, kill. This is hockey.
So when the Carolina Hurricanes came here, were the locals skeptical of this? Did they respond well?
I think there's probably a moment of excitement of look what we're getting, and then a moment of what are we getting? I don't know who these people are. What is this all about? I've watched it on TV, but I don't even know how offsides works. What is icing? What are these rules?
But the NHL and many of these new Southern teams, like the Hurricanes, learned from some of the mistakes of the Flames. In the 90s, that meant educating new fans about the sport and embracing a long-term strategy of fan base building. It also didn't hurt that a lot of these teams eventually played really well.
Kind of winning solves everything, right? You see Dallas, you see Florida, Tampa had some good teams. Dallas wins the Stanley Cup over the Sabres. And that's the most important thing is, okay, now not only are we seeing hockey in these markets, but we're seeing successful hockey. We're seeing all of these cities that nobody would consider a, quote, hockey town. And now all of a sudden they are.
Pronger shrubs it away. The Carolina Hurricanes have won the Stanley Cup.
But you can't win every time. And Cory says there's been one other major development driving the long-term success of the sport here. And this is something that we heard over and over again while reporting this story.
Outside of having a winning team, I think having youth hockey that makes kids love the game is maybe the most important thing as far as making this a sustainable thing in any market.
Yep, North Carolina, of all places, is a hotbed for youth hockey. Coming up after a break, we find out how the NHL built the next generation of hockey fans, almost completely from scratch, in the South.
There's a lot going on right now. Mounting economic inequality, threats to democracy, environmental disaster, the sour stench of chaos in the air. I'm Brooke Gladstone, host of WNYC's On the Media. Want to understand the reasons and the meanings of the narratives that led us here, and maybe how to head them off at the pass? That's On the Media's specialty. Take a listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello, hello. Check, check. All right.
On a recent Wednesday night, Broadside editor Jared Walker visited the Orange County Sportsplex. It's located in the small town of Hillsborough, about 30 miles west of where the Hurricanes play their home games. Jared lives here, but this was his first visit, and what he found inside blew his mind.
This place is just brimming with kids. Dozens and dozens, hell, hundreds of kids on skates.
This was a learn-to-skate session at the facility's ice rink. But just a few minutes later, the crowd dispersed, and about 50 players from the Carolina Thunder Hockey Club took the ice. Coach Kevin Kamenski ran them through their paces, sprinting, slaloming, shooting. Some of them, boys and girls, all under the age of 10, looked like naturals. But everyone was enthusiastic. Maybe even a little too enthusiastic.
Coach, can you explain what just happened? Yeah, he had a wiggly tooth and it was loose, and he pulled it out. So I think he's gonna go home and tell his mom that he lost it on the ice playing hockey.
You know, I laugh all the time when people talk. Even when I played here, hockey's not really going to work in the South. Well, they can't say that now.
This is Shane Willis. He's a former Carolina Hurricanes player. And when he first arrived in the South 25 years ago, he might have been a little skeptical himself.
When the Hurricanes selected me in the draft, I really didn't know where Raleigh was.
But when it came time to hang up his skates, after a career that spanned 2 decades and took him to 4 countries, he chose to return and make it his home. Why did you decide to settle in North Carolina, where the sport is so young?
A couple different reasons. One, I married a Southern girl who was not going to entertain the winters in Canada. The other part of that is I love this area. Seeing the culture here and how much people wanted Rome.
Shane is now the director of youth hockey and community outreach for the Hurricanes. His job involves spreading hockey's footprint across the state, which is much harder to do here than where he learned to play the game.
I grew up on a lake town in Alberta. I could just walk down the stairs and skate for miles. There was a hockey rink the size of a football field cleared off down by the beach. And we'd go down there and skate until we lost all our pucks. Or you could go to a local basketball court that's now turned into a hockey rink with boards and everything in Canada for free. All you do is get there with your skates and put them on and go. Our kids here don't have that ability.
But lack of available ice is only part of the problem. Hockey equipment is expensive, and quality coaching is hard to find. So since 2016, Shane's been working to bring down those barriers through the Hurricanes' First Goal program. For a one-time, heavily subsidized fee of a little over $300, kids get a full set of hockey gear and access to 6 training sessions.
We put them in head-to-toe equipment, and we get to see them score their first goal when they're on the ice. And we get to provide that smile, the enjoyment of the sport that I grew up playing in Canada, and so many of these players grew up and learned from great coaches in the area.
NHL-sponsored programs like this one, paired with local learn-to-skate initiatives like the one in Hillsborough, have had an especially powerful impact in the South. USA Hockey, which keeps meticulous stats on youth hockey participation, divides registered youth players into a dozen or so administrative districts. The southeastern region now has the highest total number, 61,000 kids. And 8,000 of those players are from North Carolina. In fact, the state now ranks 21st in the country. That would have been unthinkable 30 years ago. So why spend all of this money and time to get thousands of Southern children on the ice?
For every hockey player you create 3 fans. Because you got to think, the one who's playing hockey loves the sport. So that boy or girl has to bring dad and a sibling to a game, or mom and dad to a game. I see parents all the time, and I talked to a guy last year on the concourse. He goes, "Yep, you said once my kid was hooked on the sport, I'd become a season ticket member." You're right.
Now, a cynic might say, this is just another marketing gimmick to sell tickets for the NHL. But this actually goes much deeper.
If you're going to survive in anything, you have to make sure the generation coming up loves your product. But if you really want to get the future generation to lock in, you have to be able to play the sport.
Joe Ovius would know. He's one half of the podcasting duo of Ovius and Giulio and pretty much sports talk radio royalty in North Carolina. Joe remembers how the Hurricanes struggled to connect with a community when they first arrived.
There's a term in the business called papering the town, and that is when you just give away a bunch of free tickets.
They did a lot of that, but when spectators showed up, things were a little off.
For example, the Carolina Hurricanes, when they first got to this market, they brought out Richard Petty, NASCAR driver. And they had a Richard Petty ice machine, a Zamboni, an Olympia.
Oh my God.
Right? So they try to like NASCARify it. Just because I live in North Carolina doesn't mean I have an affinity for NASCAR. So you got to sell your game. Don't try to shoehorn a culture that doesn't exist. Sell your culture.
Like a lot of folks, Joe enjoyed the team for what it was. An occasional winner that brought the promise of big games like the Stanley Cup Finals to Raleigh. But a few years ago, that relationship fundamentally changed when his son picked up a toy hockey stick.
And this interest in hockey continued. But the issue with hockey, it's intimidating to get in. The barrier for entry is pretty intimidating, especially if you did not grow up with it like me. You know, to get instruction, to get the right equipment is very expensive.
But Joe eventually found his way to the First Goal program, where his son Jacob went from falling down every time he tried to skate to zipping around on the ice. His kid was hooked on the sport and the local team.
So the Hurricanes and the NHL understood the barrier for entry, and they eased it. They eased that friction with the First Goal program, understanding that if you're going to develop your game, if you are going to make fans for a lifetime, not only do you get them as a spectator, but you also have to help them understand the game at a level that'll create an even deeper connection with what they're watching. And playing the sport at whatever level, beer league to youth, is that way you build a connection to the hockey team, the professional hockey team that is playing. Because you'll get a better understanding of the game that you're watching, right?
And now Joe, a Southerner who did not grow up loving this sport, who resisted the charms of the game even though he lives and breathes it professionally, has gone full hockey dad.
I'm going to Minneapolis in February for a youth hockey tournament. Part of the appeal of going to Minneapolis in February isn't because it's going to be 13 degrees. It's because we have the opportunity to play outdoors.
Final question. Are you a hockey fan now? Do you have a choice?
I mean, yes, I would say I'm a hockey fan, and that's developed over time as somebody who did not grow up around hockey. But I will say one thing that I've appreciated about hockey now at the youth level, and finding myself as a team manager for my son's 13U hockey team, is that at the end of the day, I appreciate what hockey has done for my son in developing friendships. You know, I have an introverted kid, and it took him a while to kind of warm up to other people or kind of be himself. And I have seen my 13-year-old really develop this personality and become this person thanks to youth sports. For the NHL, it's not so much about becoming a fan of a particular team. It's really about selling to families and their kids that this is a sport that can really bring something else out of you.
And that's not a marketing gimmick. It's culture. This episode of The Broadside was produced by me, Anissa Khalifa, Jared Walker, and Charlie Shelton Ormond. It was edited by Jared Walker. Wilson Sayre is our executive producer. A special shout out this week to my big brother, Ibraheem Khalifa, for taking a trip down memory lane with me. Fun fact, his first job in the early aughts was actually working at the Hurricanes merch store, which at the time was called The Eye. The Broadside is a production of WUNC North Carolina Public Radio and is part of the NPR network. If you have feedback or a story idea, you can email us at broadside@wunc.org. And if you enjoyed the show, leave us a rating, a review, or share it with a friend. Thanks for listening, y'all. We'll be back next week.
Each morning, it's a new opportunity, a chance to start fresh. Up First from NPR makes each morning an opportunity to learn and to understand. Choose to join the world every morning with Up First, a podcast that hands you everything going on across the globe and down the street, all in 15 minutes or less. Start your day informed and anew with Up First by subscribing wherever you get your podcasts.